Hello, everyone. In this video, I'll take you through the current affairs for June 20 to June 27. So let's get started. Okay, so TCS, HDFC Bank, Infosys, and LIC featured among the top 100 global biggest brands, as per Cantor Brands 2022 students. So Cantor Brands is an organization that ranks and showcases the most valuable brands across the world every year. And in one of the largest brand equity surveys that was conducted this year, it found the most valuable companies across the world, and 4 Indian companies, namely TCS, HDFC Bank, Infosys, and LIC, featured among the top 100 biggest brand students. Apple retains its first position to become the first trillion-dollar brand with a brand value of USD 947.1 billion, followed by Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. So students, if we talk about India, 4 Indian brands featured in the survey, right? Featured in the rankings, basically, TCS, HDFC, Infosys, LIC. If you talk about the world, Apple is number 1, and it is followed by Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. So students, TCS was the most valuable brand from India, which sat on the 46th position. And like it is given in this table also, students, TCS is at 46th position, followed by HDFC at 61, Infosys at 64, and LIC at 92 students. And if you see the last column of the table, you'd also see its value, their value in USD. So TCS was the most valuable brand, sitting at 46th spot, and its total brand value estimated to be $50 billion, students, right? And then the rankings for the other companies have been given. And LIC, which recently held India's biggest public issue of rupees 21,000 crore, was at the 92nd spot with a brand value of $23 billion, students. And if you talk about TCS, it was the second biggest brand in the Asia Pacific region, also second only to Samsung, students, that has brand value of $54 billion. So TCS was not just the best brand in the country, but it was also the second biggest brand in the Asia Pacific region, second only to Samsung. So students, please keep these things in mind, because they're regular questions on business awareness. And look at the table here, students. These are the top 10 brands of the world. We've got Apple at number 1, followed by Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Tencent, McDonald's, Visa, Facebook, Alibaba, and Louis Vuitton. Next, students, Pakistan remains in FATF grey list for terror financing and money laundering, students. So FATF, students, it is Financial Action Task Force, which is a Paris-based intergovernment organization that has been set up to combat the problem of money laundering and terror financing, students, right? So according to this organization, Pakistan will continue to be on the grey list of countries under increased monitoring, by this agency. And the reason is that Pakistan, it has been on the grey list since June 2018 for failing to check money laundering leading to terror financing. It was given a plan of action to complete it by October 2019. So Pakistan was already on the grey list, and now it has been decided that it's going to continue to be on the grey list because it has failed to meet its various commitments. So the country continues to be on that list due to its failure to comply with the FATF mandates. That means Pakistan has not been able to sufficiently combat money laundering and terror financing that finds a breeding ground, on its soil. And in October 2021, the FATF acknowledged Pakistan's progress on a 27-point action plan. So basically, FATF is a watchdog that has, a terror financing, terrorism watchdog that had put Pakistan on a plan, on a deadline to meet certain commitments. And this was like a 27-point action plan. So it did acknowledge that Pakistan has made some progress on certain points, but kept the country on its increased monitoring list to exhibit terror financing investigations against and prosecutions of top cadres of UN designated terror groups. Next, students, International Day of Yoga 2022 celebrated on 21st June. So International Day of Yoga is celebrated worldwide every year on 21st June. And, this has been taking place since 2015. This year, students, we celebrated the 8th edition. So please keep this in mind, very important. The day we celebrate International Day of Yoga, it is 21st June. And which edition did we, celebrate this year? 8th edition. And yoga, as we know, it is an ancient physical, mental, and spiritual practice that originated in India. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi celebrated the day at Mysuru Palace ground, where he performed yoga along with others on the 8th International Yoga Day. And it was after a gap of 2 years, students, that India celebrated Yoga Day in the physical mode. For the past 2 years, because of the pandemic, it was being conducted in a virtual mode. So Narendra Modi was, the Prime Minister was joined by 15,000 participants in the event held at Mysuru. This year's theme, students, Yoga for Humanity. So, it was realized given the pandemic backdrop that, how yoga can sort of help people to stay energetic and to have a strong immune system. And it was realized that yoga is something that leads to physical, mental, and spiritual, which means overall complete holistic well-being of people. And as we all know, it is finding immense popularity across the world. If you look at the history very quickly, students, the United Nations General Assembly had declared June 21 as the International Day of Yoga in 2014 as the initiative of India with the support of 177 countries, students. So basically, this International Day of Yoga, the fact that we should have such a day and everybody should celebrate it. So this was India's idea, right? This was an India's initiative, and India was supported by 177 countries in this initiative. And this day was first proposed by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi during his speech at United Nations General Assembly on 27 September 2014. And we've been celebrating it since 2015. And this year we celebrated the 8th edition on 21st of June. Moving on, single-use plastic use to be banned by Union government from July 2022, students. So students, single-use plastic has been outlawed from July 1st. So that means it would be illegal to use single-use plastic or sell or distribute single-use plastic from July 1st, students. So what is single-use plastic? It is basically a plastic that is disposed after just one use, right? So, and it says that single-use plastics, particularly those made of polystyrene and expanded polystyrene. So students, you all should know that which is the most dangerous, which is the plastic used in single-use, the manufacturing of single-use plastic, which is considered dangerous. And that's the reason why it has been announced or declared illegal. Students, it is known as polystyrene and expanded polystyrene. Please remember this, we can call it the chemical name, that this has been, declared illegal to produce, import, stock, distribute, sell, and use starting on July 1st. So basically, it's not just using, but it's producing, importing, stocking, distributing, selling, and using, all of it, right? So that means there's a complete end-to-end ban on this plastic. A national task group has also been established by the Environment Ministry to make coordinated efforts in this area. So the list of items that have been identified as single-use plastic. So, it covers all these items: earbuds, plastic balloon sticks, flags, candy sticks, ice cream sticks, and your thermocol and plate cups, glasses, forks, spoons, knives, sweet boxes, invitation cards, cigarette packets. So basically, students, the plastic less than 100 micron, this is particularly for the banners, less than 100 micron, and banners made of less than 100 micron thick are among the 19 items identified as single-use plastic. Next, students, India comes third in renewable energy installation, students. So India has been ranked third globally for total renewable power capacity additions in 2021, students, with 15.4 gigawatt behind only China and US, students, right? So basically, India has made considerable renewable power capacity additions in 2021, and it is behind only China and US. So according to the report, despite the COVID-19 pandemic's promise of a global green recovery, this historic opportunity has been lost. And the world is unlikely to be able to achieve important climate goals this decade, according to Renewables 2022 Global Status Report. So students, GSR, Renewables 2022 Global Status Report was released, right? According to that, the world has been failing in its fight against the climate change, and they are not on track to meet the important climate goals this decade. And this is because considerable global energy transition is not taking place. So this report, it noted that most countries are not making the much needed transition to greener and cleaner renewable energy. However, India seems to have done fairly, in this aspect. So India has ranked third globally for the total renewable power capacity additions in 2021. Now, the research states that India increased its hydroelectric capacity, right? We were the third largest market globally and second largest market in Asia for new solar PV capacity. If we talk about the wind power, we are third, right? And in the energy industry, historic increases in generation and capacity were unable to keep up with the 6% growth in global electricity demand. So on one hand, it notes that India has done fairly, and it has, mentioned some the progress that India has made. So if we see, we're doing fairly in terms of hydroelectricity and wind and new solar PV capacity. However, there's still a long way to go. Next, students, Draupadi Murmu may become India's first tribal and second female president. So Draupadi Murmu, an Odisha-based Santhal, an Odisha-based tribal, basically, as its nominee for the highest constitutional position, India may ultimately elect its first tribal president. So after the legislative board of the party endorsed what is widely seen as Prime Minister Narendra Modi's pick for Rashtrapati Bhavan, BJP leader JP Nadda announced Murmu's candidacy, students. So basically, BJP has announced the candidacy of Draupadi Murmu, who is an Odisha-based Santhal, who is the who, if she gets elected as the Prime Minister, would go on to become as the first tribal president. Her candidacy for the post of president has been announced by BJP, and she would also become the second woman to hold the office of president following UPA-supported Pratibha Patil, students. And she is the front runner to succeed incumbent Ramnath Kovind, a Dalit from UP, in Rashtrapati Bhavan after July 18 elections. So elections are due on the presidential elections are due on 18th of July, students. And Murmu is the front runner to succeed the incumbent Ramnath Kovind. Moving on, students, Viva Tech 2020 conference, India recognized as Country of the Year, students. So basically, there was this conference called Viva Tech 2020, students. This is Europe's biggest startup conference, students. And it has recognized India as the Country of the Year. It is a tremendous honor for India to be named as the Country of the Year. This is due to the contribution of the Indian startups to the world, and this is recognition of the Indian startup, basically. So students, we know that last year, India had one of the highest number of unicorns, the growth of unicorns, basically. And unicorns are companies which touch $1, they're startups which touch $1 billion valuation. So India has been doing considerably well in this respect. And because of this, it was recognized as the Country of the Year for the progress it made in terms of the startup, students. So Indian startup ecosystem has been growing very fast, and it has been innovating at a rapid pace. And now we have over 100 unicorns, which reflect the scale and recognition of Indian ecosystem. That means the whole initiative taken by the government, the present government, to build a very conducive and a very a strong ecosystem for startups. So the Indian government seems to be succeeding here in its efforts because this award is the recognition of the progress made by the Indian startup ecosystem. Next, students, the 14th Bric Summit. Members of BRICS take a similar stance on world economy. So basically, students, recently 14th BRIC Summit was organized. So we know BRICS, it is a grouping of the developing countries like Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And this was a virtual summit of the 5-nation grouping, and this was sponsored by China students. And they particularly discussed, among other things, they particularly discussed the consequences of the COVID epidemic on the global economy, and that its impact is still apparent. That means we've still not been able to recover from the impact of the pandemic, and that the cooperation among the BRIC countries can be a beneficial part of its recovery, that the countries need to cooperate and come together to fight the challenges posed by the pandemic. And the BRIC member nations, according to the Prime Minister, share a similar approach to manage the world economy. So if you look at some of the key points, students, now the 5 of the major developing nations. So what is BRIC, students? It is a grouping of Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and these are 5 of the major developing nations in the world, right? They account for 41% of the world's population, 24% of the GDP, and 16% of its commerce. So as we see, it accounts for 41% of the world's population, almost half of the world's population. That means this just underlines the fact that how significant this grouping is, given that it is representative of almost 50% of the world, right? And it also counts for 24% of the GDP and 16% of the trade and commerce. And the Ukraine crisis and the protracted military stalemate between India and China in eastern Ladakh served as a virtual backdrop of the BRICS president meeting, students. So this meeting, it happened in the backdrop of the Ukraine-Russia crisis. And of course, the stalemate between India and China in the eastern Ladakh, that conflict that's still simmering. There might not be an active, like border shelling or a military activity at the border. However, there's a simmering stalemate between India and China. And this meeting held in this backdrop. And in his speech, Modi said that the BRICS had undergone a number of structural changes that has improved the organization's efficiency. That means India noted that this organization is improving in terms of the efficiency. So Modi claimed that BRICS has become a very special international group whose goals go beyond discourse, and people-to-people exchanges have improved thanks to the BRICS Youth Summit and BRICS Board Summit and increased exchanges among think tanks and civil society organizations. That means, according to Modi, this organization is a very special grouping that is going beyond rhetorics. It's actually doing carrying out some meaningful activities on the ground. And it's also facilitating exchanges between the people of the various involved countries. So very quickly, some quick facts, students. President of China, Xi Jinping, President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, President of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, and President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa. These are 4 most important countries of the world, one of them, some of the most important countries. Hence, you should know the name of the presidents. Okay, next, students, SS Mundra has been appointed as the chairman of Bombay Stock Exchange. So SS Mundra, a public interest director, to lead the world's largest stock exchange according to the BSE, students. And Justice Vikramajit Singh will be replaced by Mr. Mundra. So who is the incumbent chairman of Bombay Stock Exchange, students? It is Justice Vikramajit Singh, and he will be replaced by Mr. Mundra. And after serving for 3 years, Mr. Mundra left his position as Reserve Bank of India's deputy governor. So he's the ex RBI deputy governor, and now he has also held the position of chairman and managing director of Bank of Baroda, and now he would serve BSE as the chairman. Next, students, National Stock Exchange, NSE, and Bombay Stock Exchange, BSE, approved the merger of PVR INOX, students. So we know, students, PVR and INOX, they are multiplex chains. And according to their separate exchange filings, PVR and INOX Leisure received observation letters from BSE with no unfavorable observations and no objection. That means the two exchanges have approved the merger of these two multiplex chains. Right? According to the documents, the CCI, Competition Commission of India, must provide the necessary regulatory licenses before the merging plan can forward, students. It can go forward. Okay, so students, Piyush Goyal, India's Commerce and Industry Minister, according to him, Indian GDP might reach $30 trillion in coming 30 years, students. So Piyush Goyal, he was addressing a meeting at one of the events, and according to him, India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world, and it's predicted to reach $30 trillion in next 30 years, students. So since it's coming from the minister, it can be taken as the official figure. So please, you all can note this down, that India is expected to reach $30 trillion in next 30 years, students. And Goyal remarked that if India grows at a CAGR, compound annual growth rate, of 8% annually, the economy will double in 9 years, while speaking to the exporters in Tamil Nadu. And according to the minister, the country's economy is currently worth approximately $3.2 trillion, students. So currently we are $3.2 trillion. And in the next 9 years, we would be $6.5 trillion. That means Indian economy would be doubling up in the next 9 years. And we would reach a $30 trillion mark in the coming 30 years if we continue to grow. So there's a big if we continue to grow at if we continue to grow at 8% CAGR, students. And describing the growth, Piyush Goyal said that India would have a $13 trillion GDP in 9 more years or 80 years from now. And according to the Union Commerce and Industry Minister, despite the current difficult circumstances brought by the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine and the COVID-19 pandemic, India's economy is expanding at a healthy rate. So yes, he sort of acknowledged that it has slowed down the rate at which India was growing. There was a point about 2 years back when India was expected to grow at almost double-digit growth. So the growth rate has certainly, sort of declined, students. It has reduced. However, we are still expanding at a healthy rate despite the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine and the COVID-19 pandemic. And the conflict has caused some shortages of some commodities on the global market, which has increased the inflation, students. But India has been successful in keeping the inflation at manageable levels. Okay, next, students. India is likely to be affected by the US recession, students, right? And it could impede or hamper India's growth in the medium term. So according to the economists, the medium-term economic trajectory of India is expected to be hampered by the imminent growth slowdown in the US. So we all know, students, that US is on the verge of a major slowdown, particularly. So, it is like a lot of factors have sort of contributed to this slowdown, and this is not something unique to US. In fact, most economies around the world, they are slowing down. However, it is said that US is at the verge of a probable recession, students, right? So it is because of the COVID pandemic, the US-China trade war a few years ago, and then, of course, the ongoing Russia-Ukraine crisis. So according to the research firm Nomura is a very well-reputed research firm, students. The Indian economy is currently returning to above normal levels and is being driven by broad-based gains in consumption, investment, industry, and external sector. So according to this report, India is recovering fast from the pandemic, and it is returning to above normal levels, and it is being driven by gains, broad gains in consumption, in investment, in terms of industry, because of the external sector, students. And if you look at the impact of US market on India, around 18% of India's exports of goods are made to the US, as are more than 60% of its export of IT and ITS. So students, basically, why would India be impacted by the recession in US? Because around 18% of India's exports of goods are made to US, right? So a large, significant portion of our exports are going to US. So that would decline because of the slowdown. And more than 60% of the IT exports is again going to US. And the prognosis for India's exports and investment is likely to be negatively impacted by the slower overall global economy. So it's not just US, but the overall global economy also. And Nomura projects that India's GDP would increase by an average of 7.2% annually before slowing to 5.4% in 2023 with downside risks. So Nomura has revised the growth, the expected growth of India's GDP to 5.4%, students, by 2023. So that's all for this video, students. I'll see you next week with another video on current affairs. Bye-bye, take care.